this idea that we argue about the Second Amendment, like, let's let constitutional lawyers, I think, discuss a lot of those things, and we should all understand that and be curious about it. But our Constitution is also silly. Like, let's remake everything. Like, let's have that conversation. There's so much better that we can do. Have a serious conversation about what kind of guns and bullets people can have. Not that they can have them or that they can't have. Like, that's the conversation. That's where we should be right now. Everything gets regulated.
But the gun thing, the most part about the messiness of the gun thing is that even if you made guns illegal, even if you said you can't have any bullets, you'll all go to jail. There's so many guns. You're not getting them all.
Joe Rogan puts woke guest in his place and proves why he's the best. The Joe Rogan experience has always felt like intellectual Russian roulette. But the chamber spun especially fast the day political comedian Pete Dominick swaggered into the studio, calling for the United States to remake everything from scratch. Viewers could practically smell the gunpowder behind the grin. Dominick billed himself as a fearless truth-teller ready to bulldoze sacred cows. And for a moment, the energy crackled with promise. Yet longtime fans recognized an omen. Whenever a guest unloads sweeping solutions before the coffee cools, Rogan lets the bravado bloom and then prunes it with a single razor-sharp question. Dominick's opening salvo targeted the Second Amendment, not with nuanced critique, but total demolition. He claimed America should melt every firearm, rewrite the legal blueprint, and start again with modern sensibilities. The studio went silent except for the low hum of cameras. Rogan leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Not angry, just curious, the way a scientist studies an untested compound. He asked plainly how one enforces absolute disarmament when there are already more guns than citizens. The query landed like a cold splash, exposing the canyon between Dominick's aspiration and reality in less than 10 seconds.
But I agree. How do you do it?
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the most important point. There's already 330. There's more guns than there are people, so what do you do? So, by the way, I think you buy as many as you can back for sure. You spend a whole bunch of taxpayer money. Just help. By the way, there's a ton of people in a bind right now that have a rifle, but like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to afford my insulin. Let me get rid of this AK-47 to live another month. You buy some guns back. It's a good expenditure of money, and then melt them down and turn them into furniture for people.
So if you wanted to do that without changing the Second Amendment, like you just have a buyback where you just offer people the opportunity to make some money by giving their guns up.
Well, the Second Amendment has been interpreted wrong by the Supreme Court, in my opinion.
Rather than recalibrate, Dominick doubled down. He painted a folksy picture of a nationwide buyback where people trade AK-47s for insulin money, then watch their surrendered rifles get forged into coffee tables. On paper, it sounded humane. In practice, it ignored black market supply chains, non-compliant owners, and the billions required to fund such a crusade. Rogan, sensing the flimsy numbers, simply nodded and let the fantasy breathe long enough to reveal its holes. He highlighted the brutal logistics, millions of unregistered weapons, black market demand ready to spike, and the historic truth that prohibition fuels profit instead of peace. Dominick's utopia wilted in the heat of simple arithmetic. Chat comments erupted. One listener confessed they opened YouTube solely to mash the dislike button. Another joked they needed Dramamine for Dominick's logical whiplash. The backlash wasn't because he questioned gun culture, plenty of guests do, but because he built arguments on vapor. Rogan capitalized, shifting focus from guns to human behavior. Tools, he explained, possess no agency. Remove one weapon and intent finds another. It was a sentiment wrapped in common sense, delivered without malice, yet it drew louder applause than any punchline. Dominick tried diverting to healthcare statistics, but even he admitted the research gap. And Joe's steady, "What research on what?" detonated the contradiction. Just when the room steadied, comedian Kurt Metzger crashed in like an errant meteor, dragging the conversation into a completely new orbit. Ignoring firearms and constitutional law, he launched a furious defense of Amy Schumer against plagiarism accusations dating back years. No segue existed. 1 second, the panel dissected policy. The next, Metzger was swinging at Twitter trolls only he could see. The abrupt pivot felt like a comedy club brawl spilling onto a philosophy lecture stage, and for a heartbeat, everyone stared.
If you're hunting for a kitchen table or a stand, don't overthink it. Just head to IKEA. Or better yet, roll into Home Depot. Grab some wood, a few tools, and make something yourself. Turn it into a weekend project. Anyway, let's talk about Pete. He didn't walk into that podcast ready for a real conversation. From the very first word, it was obvious. He came loaded with takes designed to stir the pot. Didn't matter what Joe said. Pete was there to disagree. No substance, no sincerity, just non-stop shenanigans. And you could tell it was grating on Joe, who was clearly running out of patience fast.
Unsure whether to laugh or duck. Metzger's strategy hinged on volume over evidence. He insisted 20 years behind a microphone granted him omnipotent judgment. Any critic lacking stage credentials should simply shut up. Rogan, unflinching, countered with calm, surgical prompts. If video comparisons show identical punchlines, he reasoned, audiences deserve transparency, not a demand for blind faith. The quieter Joe spoke, the louder Metzger seemed until his rant resembled a car alarm everyone wished would stop. Rogan eventually slipped in the coup de grace. Credentials mean nothing if receipts tell a different story. The studio air thinned, Metzger's outrage suddenly looked like insecurity in a funhouse mirror. Through it all, Rogan never raised his voice. That patience is his superpower. He lets guests pile contradictions until gravity does the dirty work. Dominic struggled explaining how doctors could solve gun violence despite admitting researchers lack data. Rogan's 5-word probe, "What research on what?" toppled the card tower. Metzger leaned on seniority, so Rogan held up the undeniable evidence waiting online. Again, the argument collapsed under its own weight. Viewers weren't just entertained. They watched real-time quality control, learning how a single well-placed question can shred a parade of noise. Speculation swirled afterwards. Rumors suggest Dominic avoided social media for nearly a week, stunned by the reaction. Reports claim Metzger fired off a few late-night tweets before falling silent when fresh compilations of Schumer's recycled jokes began trending again. None of that is verified, but the buzz itself underscores how quickly post-episode narratives evolve when a guest's bravado meets Rogan's measured scrutiny. Even without proof, the chatter magnified the showcase of Joe's composure and added a cautionary glow around those who arrive unprepared. So why does Rogan shine amid meltdown? Experience plays a role. Thousands of hours behind the desk sharpen instincts. But the deeper secret is his willingness to listen longer than most hosts talk. He harvests every detail, waits for logical gaps, then inserts concise questions that force guests to back up claims or unravel themselves. It's martial arts for conversation. Use an opponent's momentum against them. When Dominic sprinted toward constitutional obliteration, Rogan sidestepped and let possibility collide with practicality. When Metzger charged behind righteous fury, Rogan offered the softest resistance, proof requests, and the rage exhausted itself.
Whole joke thief get there. I'm like, listen, I was there, and also I know comedy, and I know better than you jerk off at home. So if I tell you, just think I know better. I'll just put it that way. Maybe that's arrogant, but I just been doing it for 20 years, and you never had the balls to get on stage. So I think I just know better. They're outraged.
You're fighting with someone who's not even here. Nobody even knows what you're fighting over right there. You just started some joke thief fight. No one has any idea what the you're saying.
All right, guys, is when I defended Amy.
Right.
Amy, and I had people like lecture, and I'm like, don't presume to tell me shit. The same reason I became a comic. I could do that. So but at least I did it. If you get on stage and do it, I'll give it to you. But these people think they can do your job.
But hold on a second. In their defense, they're looking at a film that shows time after time bits that
Gavin made to specifically her because she said I play a racist Republican.
What?
The little YouTube video where they took movies in the show, which by the way, she doesn't write the show. It was ridiculous.
Patience, though, is not passivity. Rogan's humor slices swiftly when needed. His quip that guns lack legs carried both levity and lethal precision. It mocked Dominic's premise while grounding the discussion in reality. The audience laughed, Dominic froze, and the debate shifted onto firmer soil. That ability to mix comedy with interrogation keeps viewers glued because each exchange feels unscripted, genuine, and potentially explosive. They stay for the unpredictability, but return for the fairness. Every idea gets its day in court, but flimsy evidence never walks out unscarred. Metzger's meltdown offered a second lesson. Intensity without clarity repels. The louder he shouted, the clearer Rogan's calm became. Social media mirrored the contrast. Clips of Metzger's rant racked up dislikes while snippets of Rogan's measured rebuttals drew praise across the spectrum. People don't mind disagreement, they crave it, but they despise arrogance that refuses proof. Rogan instinctively knows that, so he grounds discussions in verifiable facts or honest uncertainty, never in rank or volume. Step back and a pattern emerges. The podcast episode began as another weekly chat and evolved into a masterclass in real-time debate moderation. Rogan didn't claim victory, he facilitated discovery. Listeners weren't told what to think, they watched reasoning triumph over rhetoric and formed opinions organically. That subtle stewardship, more than any flashy soundbite, is why the show commands loyalty. Fans believe if an idea survives Joe's scrutiny, it likely has merit. If it crumbles, they witness the collapse firsthand. The ripple effect extends beyond entertainment. In an era when online discourse often devolves into tribal fury, Rogan models an alternative, relentless curiosity paired with respect for evidence. He's willing to entertain extreme proposals, erase the Constitution, defend suspected joke thieves, so long as they withstand questioning. Most don't, and that's the point. The host doesn't need to declare himself champion. The failure of weak ideas is its own verdict, rendered by the collective logic of host, guest, and audience. Critics accuse Rogan of platforming nonsense, yet they miss the alchemy at work. By allowing fragile arguments airtime, he exposes them to sunlight, which disinfects faster than censorship ever could. Dominic's grand rewrite fantasy and Metzger's trust me defense fizzled precisely because Rogan let them speak at length, then asked for receipts. The emptier the evidence, the louder the collapse. Viewers heard every stumble and decided for themselves. That participatory judgment keeps retention high. People replay the carnage to study exactly where the fault line cracked. Yet perhaps the most telling moment arrived long after the cameras stopped rolling. A leaked off-air snippet circulating in fan forums captured Dominic asking the producer whether he could run that buyback math again because it suddenly felt less airtight. Metzger, caught nearby, reportedly muttered that he should have brought printed timelines instead of banked on memory. None of this is verified, but the rumor speaks volumes. Backstage humility often follows on-air bluster once the adrenaline fades. That unseen exchange, whispered and uncertain, underscored the real victory. Honest doubt, sparked by questions, is stronger than any shouted certainty on air in public. And that's the lasting image. Rogan seated calmly at the eye of his own self-made storm, headphones on, grin barely visible, waiting for the next bold claim to test. He doesn't need pyrotechnics, he has curiosity, discipline, and impeccable comedic timing. Those tools proved mightier than Dominic's utopian schematics and Metzger's righteous fury combined. Viewers came for controversy, stayed for clarity, and left with a renewed appreciation for questions that cut deeper than any rant ever could.